Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. Guess what? It's Sunday, and we have the weekly recap for the week of August 20th, 2025, all conveniently located in one spot. That's right here. Remember, it's a recap of the top stories. So if you think to yourself, hey, didn't I see that? Yeah, it's the best of or the recap show. Anyway, thanks for watching. And for those who haven't seen it, I hope you enjoy. Remember, the Constitution matters. CrimeTalkSearch.com. Sign up for that background subscription service today. When you do, you'll be able to do as many background searches on people here in the United States that you desire. So whether it's for personal reasons or maybe you're an armchair detective and you want to check out people that have been mentioned in all these cases that we talk about, guess what? You can use it for that as well. And here's the beautiful thing. You can cancel at any time. But when you have the subscription, you type in the name, they ask you some questions, the computer narrows it down, that searches thousands of databases across the country and comes up with a report. You're going to get information such as social media presence, phone numbers. You're going to find out email addresses. You're also going to find out if people have, debts, liens, judgments, married, divorced. Criminal history. That's a big one, right? Oh, and are they on one of those lists that you hear so much about? Go to CrimeTalkSearch.com and check it out. Now, let me also remind you to consider getting some of the merch. That's right, because the Constitution does matter. And it comes in multiple colors as well, so you can always do that one. And hey, what about this? Lawyer. That's right. Let everybody know you are an aficionado. And you can also, that's right, get the keychains, the Crime Talk keychains. Who doesn't want those? They've been flying off the shelf. Got a few left. Now's your time to get them. First on the docket, Bryan Coburger. That's why. What was his defense going to do if they went to trial? Well, in somewhat of a jaw-dropping revelation, Bryan Kohberger, obviously now the convicted killer of the 4 University of Idaho students, he and his defendants had schemed to summon the very roommates who survived his horrific rampage to testify in his defense, according to recently unsealed court records. Now, this little shocking twist exposed the depths of Coburger's audacity, planning to exploit the trauma of Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, who endured unimaginable horror the night he slaughtered their friends. A night of terror relived. Dylan Mortensen threw trembling tears at Coburger's sentencing, branded him a hollow vessel, less than human, devoid of empathy or even any remorse. Yet in a stunning betrayal of her pain, Coburger intended her to force her to take the stand had his case proceeded to trial. Now, Mortensen was mere feet away in the bedroom when Coburger broke into their residence there on November 13th of 2022, brutally murdering Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. Bethany Funk, the other surviving roommate, was also on Coburger's witness list. Still reeling from the nightmare, Funk was too shattered to attend the sentencing, entrusting a friend to read her statement, saying, quote, "I was terrified the person who did this would come for me next," end quote. The audacity of Coburger's plan to drag these traumatized survivors into court to aid his defense is nothing short of staggering, or is it? Coburger's chilling strategy didn't stop with Mortensen and Funk. The unsealed filing reveals that Coburger planned to call other close friends of the victims, including Emily Alt and Hunter Johnson, who were the first to discover the gruesome scene that fatal morning. Now, Johnson, who found the bodies and ensured the survivor's safety, was targeted alongside Jack DeCour, the ex-boyfriend of Kaylee Gonsalves. And shockingly, Coburger's list spared 2 other present that morning, Hunter and Maisie Chapin, siblings of victim Ethan Chapin, leaving their mother, Stacy Chapin, relieved that a plea deal on July 2nd spared these students from testifying. So many kids, including our own, no longer have this hanging over their heads, she said. Now, the court filing unveils Coburger's staggering ambition to call 138 witnesses, including 53 mitigation witnesses, for the penalty phase had he faced a murder conviction. Now, among them were his own family, sister Amanda and Melissa, parents Michael and Marianne, and even Washington State University professor John Schneider, despite a prior altercation that led to a warning against Coburger. The sheer scope of this list underscores the calculated nature of the defense, manipulating those closest to the tragedy to serve his cause. Now, only Mortensen and Alt faced Kohberger in court, where Mortensen delivered a searing condemnation. Quote, "He chose destruction. He chose evil. He feels nothing. He tried to take everything for me." End quote. Her words echoed as Kohberger, emotionless, was sentenced to life without parole on July 23rd of 2025 for stealing 4 beautiful, genuine, compassionate people and their light from the world. So this is very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Now, first of all, let's not get too hyped up, but it is true. They probably would have called these witnesses for whatever reason. And let me explain why. First, if the defense has any reason to call a particular witness, they have to be endorsed. And then they have to, as you get closer, provide a good faith witness list, because before you endorse just about anybody that you've ever spoken to, unless you don't want them to, because the defense doesn't have to tell the bad things that they know to the prosecution. But let's say there's one thing that you want out of a particular witness, or you want to cross-examine them on. You have to call them as a witness, because let's say the prosecution calls them as a witness. The defense then gets to cross-examine. The judge maybe limits the testimony or things don't turn out right. If you haven't endorsed those witnesses, you can't then call them in your own case in chief. So that's why. Now, would they have actually been called in the defense case? Pretty unlikely, but the defense was more than likely covering their bases. Now, was it evil for the defense to do what they did? No, they were doing their jobs by making sure that they properly followed procedure and made sure that they were going to have witnesses that they thought would provide some benefit to their client. So they were doing their job. Was it evil, sinister? Maybe a little bit. Do you think the defense thought, I'm going to endorse all these people, I want them to fret and fear, and maybe that will play into a life without the possibility of parole type of sentence? Yes, probably it did. It factored in, I'm sure. I have done such things, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't make you evil. It just simply makes you a good attorney. Now, some people may not say that and say, oh, you're terrible, Scott. But guess what? If that was you or your family member on there, that's right. You'd hire a guy like me, and you'd want to make sure I did everything I could to represent you zealously. So, was it to torment these people? I don't think so. They were representing their client. Did it possibly help in the end? Yes, it did. Now, next thing, let's talk about the Coburger case. How about some insight on the lives of Bryan Kohberger's sisters? That's right. 2 of them. So in the aftermath of the tragic 2022 University of Idaho murders, the family of Bryan Kohberger, the convicted perpetrator, has largely withdrawn from public. Obviously, we all know that Kohberger was a former criminology PhD student and was ultimately sentenced to multiple life sentences in prison. Now, the case not only devastated the victim's family, but also impacted Kohberger's own family, including his parents, Michael and Marianne, and his sisters, Amanda and Melissa. Let's talk about Kohberger's sisters and their potential strains within their family as well, based upon what we know from court records, some media reports, and some other sources provided as well. So the Coburger family, originally from Albertsville, Pennsylvania in the Pocono Mountains, has maintained a low profile since Bryan Kohberger's arrest back on December 30th, back in 2022. Now, the family issued 2 brief statements to their attorneys expressing condolences for the victim's family while affirming support for their son, Bryan. Beyond these statements, Michael, Marianne, Amanda, and Melissa have largely avoided public commentary, leaving many questioning about their relationship and their response to this whole tragedy. So Melissa Kohberger is actually a therapist with a poetic voice. That's right. Bryan's elder sister, by 3 years, is a licensed mental health therapist based in New Jersey, specializing in trauma, anxiety, and ADHD conditions later cited in her brother's defense. Now, back in May of 2022, just 6 months before the Idaho murders, Melissa authored a poignant poem published in a Pennsylvania newspaper following the Uvalde, Texas school shooting, which claimed 19 children and 2 adults. The poem, submitted by her mother, Marianne, mourned the loss of the young lives, with lines such as, "Bereft of their laughter, there is now no sound as we lower our children into the ground." This act of shared grief underscored Melissa's sensitivity to the tragedy, a stark contrast to the events tied to her brother months later. So Melissa attended Bryan's extradition hearing in Monroe County, Pennsylvania back in January of 2023 alongside her family, but has not appeared at subsequent hearings, including his plea hearing and sentencing in July. Her absence has prompted speculation about a possible estrangement, though no definitive evidence confirms this. Court records do indicate that Melissa was interviewed separately from her family on November 30th in 2024, following a family evaluation that included Michael, Marianne, and Amanda on November 29th of 2024. Her residence is obviously in New Jersey, distinct from the family's Pennsylvania home, which may partly explain her limited involvement in the court proceedings. Other reports suggest that Melissa lost her job as a therapist in the spring of 2023, likely due to the public scrutiny surrounding her brother's case. She has since resumed work in her field, though details about her current professional status remain unclear. Then you got Amanda Coburger. She's a complex one, I guess. Anyway, Amanda Coburger, Bryan's other sister, has also faced significant personal and professional challenges since the murders. Like Melissa, Amanda worked as a therapist, specifically as a school counselor in Pennsylvania, but reportedly lost her position in the spring of 2023. She continues to reside with her parents in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, and court records reveal a unique aspect of Amanda's involvement in the case. She was listed as a potential witness for both the defense and the prosecution, like we just talked about. And the defense included all immediate family members, Michael, Marianne, Amanda, and Melissa, as potential mitigation witnesses to argue against the death penalty. However, Amanda's inclusion on the prosecution's witness list filed back in June of 2025 raised questions about her potential testimony. Now, while the reasons remain undisclosed, prosecutors later indicated that Amanda had nothing substantially incriminating to offer, and she was dropped as a prosecution witness before the trial was avoided through Coburger's plea deal on July 2nd. So Amanda attended Bryan's sentencing on July 23rd, along with her mother, Marianne, where both appeared visibly emotional during the victim's family impact statement. Her presence at the sentencing, contrasted with Melissa's absence, highlights differing levels of engagement with the legal process among the siblings. So the Coburger family dynamics have been tested not only by Bryan's crime, but also by earlier challenges. Court records from 2014 document an incident in which Michael Kohberger reported his then 19-year-old son to the police for stealing Melissa's $400 phone to purchase heroin, indicating Bryan's struggle with drug addiction. Now, the incident suggests pre-existing strains within the family, particularly between Bryan and Melissa. A 2023 Dateline report claimed that one of Bryan's sisters, unnamed but speculated to be Amanda, had suspicions about his behavior when he returned home from the holiday in 2022, noting his proximity to the crime scene and searching his car for evidence. While investigators have not corroborated this account, it hints at underlying tensions or doubts within the family. And prosecutor Bill Thompson clarified that the family provided no tips or evidentiary items, but cooperated fully with the investigation. And then we had the digital forensic analysis conducted by Celebrate that as previously we've talked about, revealed that Bryan frequently communicated with his parents, particularly his mother, before the murder, but had limited contact with his sisters. And whether Amanda or Melissa maintains contact with Bryan following his conviction remains unknown. Both sisters pursued careers in mental health, reflecting a commitment, obviously, to helping others. And Melissa's work as a therapist focused on trauma and related conditions, while Amanda's role as a school counselor involved supporting students' emotional well-being. In a curious twist, Amanda has also had a brief acting stint in 2009, appearing in a low-budget slasher film, 2 Days Back, which depicted hikers killed in a stabbing frenzy, an eerie parallel to her brother's later crimes. Now, the film's director, Kevin Alexander Boone, described Amanda as professional and easy to work with during the production. Now, since Bryan's arrest, the Coburger's family has faced intense public scrutiny and obviously professional and personal losses. But the sisters' professional setbacks combined with the emotional toll of their brother's actions have likely compounded their challenges. While Amanda and Melissa have avoided public statements, their limited court appearances and reported distance from Bryan suggest a complex family dynamic indeed. Melissa's absence from key hearings and Amanda's potential role as a prosecution witness point to possible differences in how the sisters have processed that tragedy. As Bryan Kohberger begins his life sentence in multiple life sentences, let's be accurate, in Idaho maximum security prison, his family continues to navigate the aftermath. For Amanda and Melissa, rebuilding their lives may involve balancing personal healings and enduring impact of their brother's actions, while the full extent of their relationship with Bryan remains private. Their professional resilience and past contributions reflect some efforts to move forward among some profound adversity. People always forget. Obviously, you have usually the defendant, right? You have the victims, you have the victims' families. But oftentimes, the perpetrators' families are affected too. They are forever known as that guy's brother or father. And, that's tough to go through. Certainly the family member didn't condone or encourage or do anything like that, but they often get the negative repercussions. And, it just shows when you commit crime, it's not just you, it's not just the victims. It is everybody in your realm that it affects. The sheriff's daughter speaks. That's right. Lila Steins, the 18-year-old daughter of the Letcher County Sheriff Sean Mickey Steins, publicly addressed unfounded rumors connecting her to District Court Judge Kevin Mullins, who was shot by her dad back in September of 2024. Now, in a TikTok video that garnered some 1.9 million views and 41,000 likes, Lila Steins criticized individuals for spreading fabricated stories about her involvement with Judge Mullins. She stated that such rumors exacerbated her personal grief and urged those responsible to engage in productive activities instead. A follow-up video clarified that her comments targeted local gossip and anonymous online commentators, not media coverage of the incident herself. She emphasized her humanity and ongoing efforts to cope with the situation, noting that the video reach exceeded her initial expectations of a small local audience. Now, the rumors originated from the discovery of Lila Stein's phone number in Judge Mullins' telephone. Surveillance footage shows the Sheriff Steins using Mullins' phone to dial his daughter immediately prior to the shooting, though no response to the call had actually been confirmed. Sheriff Steins has admitted to firing the fatal shots that killed Judge Mullins inside the judge's chamber, but he has pled not guilty to the murder counts, and he contends that he acted in a heat of passion, which constitutes manslaughter at most, and intends to pursue a insanity defense there in Kentucky. Now, a medical evaluation from the Leslie County Detention Center indicated he experienced active psychosis for several days following the incident, and he remains held without bond. Now, post-incident allegations against Mullins included claims of corruption and operating his office inappropriately, with one accuser, a woman by the name of Sabrina Atkins, asserting she witnessed sexual activity in the judge's chambers and referenced potential videotapes. Now, both Lila Steins and her mother, Caroline Steins, have firmly denied any relationship between Lila and Mullins, who was married with 2 children. State Police Detective Clayton Stamper testified before a grand jury that no evidence exists of contacts between Lila Steins and Mullins via text, social media, phone, or in person, despite her number being in his phone. Now, Steins and Mullins had maintained a long-standing friendship, including shared lunches on the date of the shooting, and Steins previously served as Mullins' bailiff in his courtroom before his election to being sheriff in 2018. This is a weird case, ladies and gentlemen. Could you imagine shooting your friend, colleague that you worked with, and then claiming insanity? I mean, I guess it happens. We had one where a guy went to work one day and started stabbing everybody in there, and turns out he was not guilty by reason of insanity. But it's very odd when the sheriff does it. There's no doubt he did it, unless there's maybe the best is you do heat of passion, maybe, but it's not like the judge was doing something that would warrant that. So it's going to be a tough case. And the NGRI, I don't know. We're going to find out how well the community loves Sheriff Steins, now former Sheriff Steins, I guess. But, there were those rumors came out early on. We probably mentioned them once or twice because that's what people were mentioning. And people in the know said this is what was happening. And then people said, no, it's not true. And then it turned out to be that there was absolutely no evidence of any contact between Judge Mullins and Sheriff Stein's daughter whatsoever. And frankly, all the other allegations of misconduct by the judge have somewhat fallen flat, with not a whole lot of corroboration. There's a lawsuit going on, but as far as we know, no settlements have been made. So it's just allegations at this particular point. So we'll continue to follow that case. Let's get the show on the road. That's for sure.
But we only have one story for you today. And it's a story that's, frankly, I'm not sure who to be upset with, the court or the YouTuber that basically made it so we won't be able to see any of the live streaming in court for the Barry Morphew case, at least for now. So let's dissect this real quick. All right. When you go on the live streaming for the state of Colorado, it clearly says you cannot record it. All right. We have not recorded it. I would love to live stream all of these proceedings. We've done that in many, many cases, but it's been authorized by the court. Frankly, this case should be authorized by the court. The only way that you make sure that there is not misinformation is that you let the facts from the court come out so that everybody can see what's taking place and what doesn't take place. Now, this goes out here to this JLR investigates. I've seen a couple of his videos. Seems like a decent guy. I think he got over his skis on this particular case. But he basically, let's face it, he's ruined it for everybody. And then all the people that would threaten people. We talked about that. We are free speech advocates, but you can't make threats to individuals. That's against the law. All right. And so these knuckleheads have now ruined it for everybody. At least if it was live stream, we could watch it and take view. Now the only people that can do it are credentialed media, right? The Denver Post, the ABC, NBC, CNNs. They can watch via WebEx, which is a separate than the live streaming, and they have to have their faces on, and it can't be recorded. And obviously, if they do, then they can face contempt cases here. So a couple of takeaways. One, as JLR investigates, and I'm nothing personally against the guy, but let's face it, he ruined it for everybody, all right? And all the people that threatened the attorneys, the defendants, and everybody else in this particular case. The judge. What enough? Seriously, that goes completely against everything the American system is made for. And frankly, I wish the judge did have the resources and had the time and could go after all of the people that made threats to the participants in this case. Completely uncalled for. Unbelievable. The other thing the judge is worried about, because people go off on these conspiracy theories thinking they have some inside track. That's why we like to keep it with the facts, right? We stick to the facts. We stick to the analysis of what we know, and the facts may change and the analysis may change. That's called being intellectually honest. All right. But some of these people, and we saw that in the Bryan Coburger case, have no grasp in reality. There's still people that believe that Bryan Coburger was innocent. He gave up that presumption of innocence when he pled guilty. All right. Barry Morphew is entitled to that presumption of innocence. All right. You can read the affidavit. You go through it. These are the facts that we know. Public information. But to say that you have some other information, unless you're going to go turn that over to the police, just stop it. And not just because I'm an attorney, but there's a lot of people, they mean well, but they do more harm when they don't know what the hell they're talking about. All right. I got to go to work. Yeah, we're here in a restaurant, but this just upset me so much. One, this JLR, man, you messed it up for everybody. Two, it should be live streamed, and I would take issue with the court's order, respectfully, of course. I disagree with her because I think the way that you keep misinformation from coming in is that you actually show, and you should allow people to stream as much information as possible so that the true facts get there. And you can say, no, here's what took place in court, not some tin hat, crazy conspiracy theory who has no concept of what takes place in the law, the procedure, or anything else like that. So that's all I got to say about that.
Next on the docket, It's always about the money. That's right. Idaho prosecutors are pushing for a full restitution in the Coburger case. So in a contentious legal battle over financial accountability in the aftermath of the brutal 2020 stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students, prosecutors have rebuffed defense arguments against additional restitution payments from convicted killer Bryan Kohberger. Now, the dispute centers on approximately $27,000 in travel and lodging expenses incurred by victims' family during the court proceedings and amid revelations that Coburger has received ongoing financial support while incarcerated. For all you know that aren't familiar, Coburger pled guilty back in July of 2025 under the Rule 11 plea agreement that spared him the death penalty in exchange for 4 consecutive life sentences plus 10 years for the burglary charge. The agreement explicitly allows the state to seek restitution for funeral expenses and reimbursement to the Idaho Victims Compensation Program. At sentencing, Coburger was ordered to pay $250,000 in fines and fees to the state, $20,000 civil judgment for each of the 4 victims, and nearly $29,000 to the compensation fund. However, the state amended its restitution request back in September of this year, seeking an additional $20,000 for the parents of the victims, Kaylee Gonsalves, and more than $6,900 for the mother of Madison Mogan. These funds cover unreimbursed travel and accommodation costs for attending hearings, expenses prosecutors initially believed could be covered by the Crime Victims Compensation Program, but later deemed ineligible. So the defense cites some other funds. So donations and an inability to pay. Kohberger's legal team, led by attorney Ann Taylor and Alyssa Mathis and Bricka Barlow, filed an objection on October 7th of this year, arguing that the requested amounts do not constitute direct economic loss under the Idaho Code, specifically Section 19-5304. The defense highlighted substantial public donations received by the Gonsalves and the Mogan family through GoFundMe campaigns, which they claim specifically addressed these very expenses. And Mr. Coburger has no ability to pay now or in the future to pay restitution because he's serving 4 consecutive life sentences plus 10 years, the defense noted, emphasizing his incarceration as a barrier to earning income. The objection has drawn sharp criticism from victim advocates who view it as an attempt to evade responsibility. Stephen Gonsalves, Kaylee's father, has publicly expressed frustration with the situation where Kohberger's prison conditions in separate statements, though he has not directly commented on the restitution fight. Though the prosecutors countered with, legal precedent and evidence of the defendant's finances. In a response filed October 24th, the Latah County prosecuting attorney, through a senior deputy, Ashley Jeggs, dismissed the defense argument as contrary to Idaho law and public policy. And they were citing to a case decided by the Idaho Supreme Court, called State v. Cheney, Cheeney, and the filing asserts that victims are entitled to full restitution regardless of third-party payments unless those payers have a contractual obligation. In a response filed on October 24th, the Latah County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, through a senior district attorney, Ashley Jeggs, dismissed the defense's argument as being completely contrary to Idaho law, and they cited State v. Cheney, which is a case, Cheeney, and the filing asserts that victims are entitled to full restitution regardless of third-party payments unless those payers have a contractual obligation, a threshold not met by voluntary charitable donations like those from GoFundMe. Charitable donations, they cite in their brief, arise from voluntary generosity rather than legal obligation. The state responds, and they also cite State v. Schultz to underscore the policy imperative of making victims whole for losses caused by criminal conduct, irrespective of community support. Addressing the ability to pay claim, prosecutors reference State v. Bibby, B-Y-B-E-E, which holds that immediate financial constraints do not preclude restitution orders even for life sentence defendants. Courts retain discretion to consider factors like age and health, but the state argued that Coburger's circumstances warrant enforcement. Now, a sealed exhibit attached to the filing, a summary of financial contributions to Coburger during his detention at the Ada County Jail and the Latah County Jail, reveals a history of this defendant receiving financial compensation from family and third parties. Prosecutors did not disclose specifics, but noted that such inflows could be intercepted to satisfy the victim's claims. Now, the case's obviously international notoriety, the state added, heightens the potential for future revenue streams for Coburger, such as from media deals or publications. And under Idaho Code, Section 195301, subparagraph 1, akin to the New York Son of Sam law, any profits from recounting his crimes would be escrowed by the state treasurer, with the victims able to claim those funds during a civil judgment within 5 years. And that's Idaho Code 19-5305 for those who want to go double check to make sure I'm not making this up. Anyway, speculation persists about Coburger potentially authoring a book or cooperating on some other type of a project. Now, forensic psychologist Kathleen Ramsfeld, a former instructor of Coburger, told an online paper that she would consider documenting his story, but insisted no profits would reach him, echoing her approach with the serial killer Dennis Rader, the BTK guy, where proceeds benefited the victims. All right. So a hearing on the restitution matter has been set for November 5th. And guess what? It should be streamed, so we'll be bringing it to you. All right. Now, the outcome could set precedent for balancing offender accountability with victims' rights in high-profile cases, particularly regarding the treatment of charitable aid and post-conviction earnings. So this gets a little interesting. And the judge, when he's ruling on this case as it relates to Coburger having to pay restitution, clearly the intent of the judge was to make sure that basically no money whatsoever goes to Coburger and that it would go to the family based upon the civil judgments and fines that the court imposed. I'm totally fine with that. The question then becomes whether the objection to the monies being requested for travel expenses, and these were going to be somewhat in anticipation of those, but a lot of the funds are apparently returned. So it's interesting. And I certainly don't want Bryan Coburger to have to not pay what is due to the victims. You know, it's just not fair in life. Even if you're a convicted killer, you shouldn't have to pay more than what you're entitled to under the statute. I think the judge will ultimately come down that Coburger will have to pay, and it'll probably go up to the Supreme Court there. I'm assuming that's not going to blow up his deal if he appeals anything, since it is as it relates to restitution. More than likely, they made their record. They'll see what happens. What are they going to do? What's the worst thing that happens to Bryan Coburger? What are you going to do? Send him to prison for the rest of his life, right? It doesn't really matter. But it is interesting because what do we say here at Crime Talk all the time? It's always about the money, right? But we got to make sure that crime doesn't pay for the convicted, for sure. Got to make sure of that.
Lori Vallow rolls her eyes at the judge's restitution order, right? In a display of unparalleled humility, Lori Vallow Daybell has been compelled to fork over almost $12,000 in restitution to Kay Woodcock, all tied to the inconvenient matter of Charles Vallow's murder back in Arizona. Now, Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Justin Bareski, ever the stickler for details, finalized this sum during a riveting Friday afternoon hearing. Now, Vallow dialed in virtually from the luxurious confines of the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center, and the prosecutor, Trina Kay, helpfully tallied the bill at $11,747.99, covering such essentials as travel, accommodations, therapy, and miscellaneous inconveniences. Vallow, in a stunning act of restraint, offered no rebuttal whatsoever. Given the flawless execution of my trials and the ironclad certainty that Your Honor will rubber stamp this anyway, no matter what or anyone else utters, I just stipulate right now, Vallow informed the judge with the utmost grace. Now, a jury had previously convicted her in June of conspiring to end Charles Vallow's life, and in a separate Arizona spectacle, she also earned a guilty verdict for plotting against Brandon Boudreaux, her ex-nephew-in-law. And then back in July, Boreski magnanimously sentenced her to life behind bars and slapped her with more than $534,000 in combined fines, plus those delightful extra charges. Restitution naturally trumps every other penalty we've so generously imposed, the judge declared at the hearing. It shall be extracted at the absolute maximum rate from whatever pittance resides in her prison account. Now, Daybell is already luxuriating in a life sentence in Idaho for the tragic demise of her children, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, plus scheming to dispatch Tammy Daybell, her husband's prior spouse. Now, when the judge politely inquired whether any substances, drugs, medications, or alcohol had clouded her judgment in the last day regarding the debate, Vallow appeared positively thrilled by the query. "Have I ingested any drugs, Your Honor? Is that the gist?" she reported. Might Your Honor recall that I reside in prison? Access to such frivolities is regrettably non-existent. Thus, no, I have not. The judge, unflappable as ever, appreciate the clarification. Pressed on whether coercion, threats, or force had influenced her choice, Vallow quipped, "Merely my trials, Your Honor," exerted that gentle persuasion. Post-hearing, Woodcock shared that Daybell was simply craving her customary limelight, a splendid waste of everyone's precious time. Further restitution awaits for Boudreaux, and Kay noted the figure remains under enthusiastic computation. So, yeah, I mean, clearly Lori Vallow is a horrible human being. But, you know, I guess at this point she figures, what the hell does it matter? She's going to spend the rest of her life in prison and die there. So she might as well get a little flippant with the judge. After all, what's he going to do to her? Send her to prison?